Sheriff Adkinson.
Well, good afternoon. Walton County Sheriff Mike Adkinson here, along with our trusty public information unit affairs coordinator, officer, director, Miss Lindsay Darby and Miss Corey DeBritnia, and this is the Sheriff Live. And for those of you that are joining us, we are the Walton County Sheriff's Office in Walton County, Florida. That is halfway between Pensacola and Tallahassee. We run from the Alabama line to the Gulf of Mexico. And this is a kind of our town hall meeting where I meet with my stakeholders, the bosses, citizens of Walton County. We try to do this a couple of times a month if we can. And we answer questions about things going on in Walton County specifically or in the general area. Or we'll take questions about bigger things at large, depending on what's going on. And we don't guarantee an answer. We guarantee we'll try and find an answer for you. And with that, it's been crazy busy lately. There's a lot of stuff going on. And currently, actually, as we're speaking right now, our organization is involved with the Coast Guard and South Walton Fire District, and some other folks looking for a missing kayaker at this point that was missing off Grayton Beach, and we're going to continue to search, and hopefully we're going to get some good news there, and that's what we're shooting for. So that's really been kind of dominating what's going on later this afternoon. A lot of things going on over the last few weeks. It's been spring break, and that comes as no surprise to anyone in Walton County. But our busiest week will come up this next week, our Houston spring break. We got through Atlanta 2 weeks ago, so went pretty well there. At about 95 to 97% occupancy this week. So if you live in Walton County and you're going to, what I would say is buy your groceries early, because it's going to look like a plague of locusts came through in just a little bit. People are going to be clearing out the grocery stores, and traffic is going to be heavy. So please keep that in mind over the weekend.
Yeah. We've had a couple of arrests during spring break, made some juvenile arrests, one in particular with a BB gun, another got into an altercation, and another got in an altercation with our sheriff deputies on the beach.
Sure. And listen, your bottom line is, they say you can't fix stupid. And these are individuals, and they're being treated and addressed and dealt with that way. I think we've had a lot of crowd mitigation stuff we're trying to do differently, trying different things. So far, so good. We'll see if this strategy continues to hold for us. But it's been extremely busy, and we've had a lot of folks out working. So, and, there's a lot of other things going on in the county than just in the south end of Walton County. So we've had a lot of stuff happen, a lot of stuff going on, but some pretty successful cases we dealt with this weekend. We just made an arrest on a shooting that is, where an individual shot a juvenile, and then he and his parents attempted to cover that. And those arrest warrants were served last night, I think.
Yesterday morning.
Yesterday morning, as well as some search warrants in there. And so we were glad that is not a homicide, because very easily that could have been a homicide. And so we were certainly glad. That was right outside the Defeniak Springs area. We were glad that we were able to bring to successful resolution. Our investigators and that CIB section, our forensic folks did a good job of putting together and finding some really strong evidence, and so we're glad that was taken care of. Mm-hmm. We've had several big cases. We had a big sentencing on a drug case, which was the methamphetamine, the cocaine case. We had another methamphetamine and fentanyl case a week or so ago.
We've had two big federal cases.
Yeah, two big federal cases sentenced. So we were successful sentencing on those cases, and we were glad to see that as well. But it's been very busy, and obviously, with traffic crashes, a fatality yesterday on Highway 83.
Mm-hmm. Early in the morning.
Long-time residents. I knew the gentleman, known him since I was a child. He's from really a good man, and we're certainly sorry to see that. And it's a tough thing, and that's what our first responders, our deputies, firefighter, EMTs, these are the things they deal with. And we try to mitigate loss of life where we can, but it's going to be a tough business. So
yeah. Philip Canterbury said he attended our firearms training class this month, and he enjoyed the class, and said the training staff was great.
Excellent, wonderful.
He said he'd like to see some rifle training in the future.
Yeah, that's actually a good suggestion. That may be something we need to look at. We've always been careful not to step on local businesses that are doing that as well. But I think there is some, Mr. Canterbury, I think that's actually a good idea, and that may be something we need to be looking at, because we do have an advanced pistol class. And so And we were glad to see that, people like you decided to come out and take it. Even though you don't have to have a concealed weapons permit anymore in Florida, it's still a good thing to help familiarize yourself with the law and the weapon as well, too. So I'm glad to hear that.
Sure. Kristen Sherry Scarpito is asking if you could touch on the rules for electric bicycles. Some of them go really fast and creep up on folks on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Should they be on the street as motorized vehicles?
No. So, I get some of that gets into a question of an opinion. So for the law, there's something about how many brake horsepower in that vehicle or on that bicycle. They are not classified as like a moped or a vehicle, so that they don't fall under that rule. They can be on the bike path. I know they're fast, and I absolutely understand that. That's just kind of how the law classifies them. They are under that threshold of what's called brake horsepower, and as such, they are eligible to ride on the roadway in the bike lane only, or on the bike path. But I do realize they can be very fast. So yes.
Yeah. Gray Cunningham Lynn just is asking for people who are tuning in a little bit late here for updates on our missing kayaker in Great Beach.
Yeah, so where we are right now is the Coast Guard is out, as well as the Sheriff's Office and South Walton Fire District, and Bay County Sheriff's Office was assisted as well. So we've got a lot of people that are trying and working. We're just remains to be seen. We're just out there trying to locate Mr. Smelly, and the good thing is he has a flotation device with him, so we know that, and that's what we're hoping for, is to make contact with him. They've got something called a FLIR, which is an infrared device that allows us to see warmth or heat in the water, and so that's something that's being used by the Coast Guard now as well. Bay County used their FLIR a little while ago, and so we're just going to continue to do that. We're going to stay at it.
Great. Dan Parker says, thanks for all you do in the community. We have a question from Joe Burton.
Okay.
What's your definition of wet sand, and where can it be found in Florida statute?
Yeah, so I can't quote the statute to you, so I have to be careful about trying to do that. So what is essentially wet sand? Wet sand is where, as the definition the kind of the court has given us from the regard to this, is where the wave line is at. So it can't be wet sand from where it was high tide last night or in the morning. So where the wave line breaks, that is what they call the wet sand. That's the short, kind of the easiest version I can give you. I will say this: if you go to our WaltonSO.org, we have our policy up.
Yes.
It took a fleet of attorneys to come up with that. Sadly, and it kind of walks through the 4 different areas and how this works. And I'm always careful to say I shirk this, but I just want to be real clear. This is not something we have any real leeway in. We are bound by the law in this matter. I am way less than pleased the way things are going. But this is not a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Not a surprise.
And that policy can be found on our website. It's waltonso.org. If you go to community and then community, I think it's under public records. So we have a public records tab at the top of the page, and it will say trespassing on Gulf front property, standard operating procedure, and the whole policy is on our website.
Also, there is I'm sure our video is up from our town hall meeting where we kind of go through this thing at length and answer questions. But the short version to your question is where the wave line is breaking at is the definition of that.
Yeah, and the video from our town hall meeting is up on YouTube, and it's right here on Facebook. If you go back in our live videos, you can find it there. Ted Brown. Hi, Ted. What happened to the 2 Walton County Sheriff's Office helicopters, and where did proceeds go towards when they were sold?
About a decade ago, we sold those based on the cost of maintaining pilots, and quite frankly, because of drones, because the ability of and what drones can and can't do. They made better sense for our operational cost benefit because they were a 421, not 420, I was going to say a 421 exchange. They were a military exchange program. They were exchanged to another agency, so we don't necessarily sell them quite like that. One of them was sold. That was put back into buying high-end drones. That's kind of the short version of it. Some of them have to be exchanged based on the age of the helicopter. The helicopters were 40-plus years old.
Yeah.
So they were kind of at the end of their life cycle. That was one of the reasons we were getting rid of them, is their airframe was going down. So the other agency that got them used them for parts, so they're not necessarily flying them.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is not a good sign if you're, from our standpoint, we don't want to fly something that was getting down to just parts lifespan.
Sure. Derek Gossett, I heard talk about wanting to introduce the PBA FOP to the local agency. I think that could benefit the deputies greatly. What does the sheriff think about that type of support?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not generally in favor of it, just simply because it's one more level, and from my standpoint, they're not going to represent the staff better than I do. But hey, listen, they can do what they want to do from that standpoint. I've never seen it work out. I've been at agencies with really large unions, plus and minus. So, we've got a good relationship with our fire union. I think that's a good sign from that standpoint. Yeah, I'm kind of meh is I guess the short version of it.
Yeah. Alicia Schnitzer, me too. I enjoyed the firearms course as well. A lot of people asking about Coach or Chris Melly. Can the public sit on the wet sand on private beaches? That question is from Whitney Durst.
Yeah, so if you're in wet sand, anything wet sand or below is sovereign for the state of Florida, right? So that's kind of the short version of that.
Okay. John Harrison, can we start a program where those of us with Airbnbs allow the sheriff's office and later expanding it to other departments? The program would allow for folks to donate a free night or so.
I have to rephrase that.
To donate an Airbnb to deputies, to the sheriff's office.
Sure. I mean, we have to have some limit. I think it's certainly a positive thing for deputies. We just have to make sure that it's, from our standpoint, that we manage that kind of stuff. We have to be a little careful about some of that stuff. Yeah. That's a great idea, and thank you.
Danny Garrett on Facebook, I've been told we're not allowed on the wet sand on the private beaches and have to be in the water now. Is that what's being enforced?
No, that's not true. It's not accurate.
I believe Danny reached out to us and asked about fishing on the beach. And I think that if you're in the water and you're fishing, that's fine. Great.
You're fine.
Yeah.
Renee. But again, I would just bigger questions that I would go back and look at our policy on that, because it is online with some pretty good. It's complicated, but the short version is if you're in the water and the wet sand like that, it's not really an issue.
Renee, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. It's a tough one. It says, will you arrest Walton County citizens for sitting on private beaches?
So I tell you, it's trespass under the law. I don't have any control of that whatsoever, and there is no sheriff, police officer, state trooper, highway patrolman, FWC that can tell you otherwise. I don't have any choice. Can be removed from office from failure to perform duties. So that's a short version. Here's the kind of more complex version of that. We haven't done that. We don't intend to do that. We're going to find a way to mitigate and to work around those kind of things, right? If you're saying you just want to be arrested, that you want to prove a point and get arrested, I can't really help that. I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. So, we prefer not to be put in that position. I think this is something that you have to take up with your legislature, your legislators, and your Board of County Commission. It's not, the sheriff doesn't have any purview in this other than I am bound by the law. So that's kind of the short version to it. And we were not privy to the settlement. We weren't a part of it. Yeah, we didn't negotiate the settlement or anything like that. And the settlement, I want to go back to this. The settlement only applied to settlement properties, I think, are about 240 pieces of property out of 900. And that's east we were actually talking this morning about a piece of property that they're quieting the title now. They're trying, the owners there are taking ownership of the beach in another area. And I think a lot of people think that's over and it's not happening anymore. It is absolutely still happening. So you really should be talking to your elected official, your legislative body about this, and voice your concerns and voice the way you want it to be. What actions you would like to see them try and take. But I have to tell you, because I've said this to a county commissioner who called and said, well, I don't want anybody ever arrested there. I said, I don't have any choice. If it comes down to that, I don't have any choice. We wish and we hope people don't put us in that situation, but your concerns are my concerns in that regard.
And to follow up, Maggie Burns, how many, if any, beach trespassing citations have been given? I got a question the other day via email. How many people have been arrested?
None.
Zero.
None. And so, because basically what we've been able to do with the beach community service officers and the deputies, when everybody's trying to talk and try to work out between the property owners and the
beachgoers.
And the beachgoers. We've had some property owners that were wrong. They thought they owned places on the beach they did not own. And we've had the converse. We've had people say, hey, look, well, I don't think this is right. There's a lot of things I don't think is right, but I don't have any real choice, and so we ask people to be as reasonable as they can, but don't go down there and put us in that situation because we're not the one that made that decision. You have an entity in front of you. I think that's one of those things you'll find sympathy with your Board of County Commissioner, and they can determine what path they want to take. But that's not something the sheriff's office, again, or the state's attorney's office, or any other entity cannot willfully choose not to enforce a law if I know there is a violation.
Yeah. Ryan Nessett, in a previous Sheriff Live, you said if you were wrong, if that's not private property, you can commit a battery. You just committed a battery, and the homeowner or homeowners association is liable for that battery that you've committed on them.
Correct.
Why are beachfront owners involved in the Dune Allen quiet title lawsuit calling 911 to remove people from their property that they don't own? Have they been instructed to stop committing battery or charged with battery?
All right, so a couple of different things. Trying to remove people isn't necessarily battery. Battery is an intentional touch or strike. So you have to touch or strike to have a battery. So just want to kind of separate our terms here for a second. Yeah, they can't have you removed from a piece of property that they do not have the title to, right? And I'm pretty sure I know what he's talking about. I think this is where the security guard is down there as well, too.
Yes,
correct?
he goes on to say that the private security firm is giving wrong information.
They are. We spoke. So Lieutenant went down there and explained to them, and explained to the property owners that had questions about it or thought they own it. We explained to them that they do not own that property yet. Mm-hmm. Now, if they quiet that title in the next 2 weeks or the next month, there's nothing I can do about it then. So, and I'm not an attorney. I don't know how you stop that action. I don't know how you fight that action, or how what is the correct pathway of that. Today, at that particular piece of property, they do not even own down to the water. So they don't even own down to the water. We were told and instructed that they were trying to quiet the title and take possession of the beach from their current property line to the water. I don't know whether that's going to be granted to them or not. That's in front of a judge here.
Dustin Hostetler, and this is just along the lines that we're talking about right now. Will the sheriff's office address the harassment both residents and visitors are receiving from private security on beachfront owners?
Yeah.
Are they allowed to flash badges?
So, yeah, this is the same thing we were just talking about, and it's probably the same location. We went down and had a discussion with the homeowner and the security as well. Nothing about holding a private security private security license allows you to violate the law. So if they step across that line and violate the law, they're held accountable for that, right? Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. Just because they engage in conduct or language I don't like or I find offensive doesn't mean it's necessarily legal. That's where we're going to have the rub here. The question is, can they do what they say they're doing? Now, in this case, they actually were wrong. The property owner did not own down to the water. Mm-hmm. And so we've addressed that. I don't think that is going to be an issue there right now. Am I worried that in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I don't know how long this action is going to take, am I worried that in a month that they're going to own that piece of beach all the way down the water? Yeah, I think that's a pretty legitimate chance that's going to happen. Then it becomes a totally separate issue. You can't trespass on it, argue with them, and then because you don't believe in it, it's a problem. This is a problem. This is nothing new. I've repeatedly said this is going to be an issue. We've asked not to be engaged in this, involved in it, but I don't really have a choice at this point. AJ
Spalding, can we add a total number of golf carts pulled over to the spring break numbers?
Yeah, we actually were talking about that. Where were we at? Do you know?
I think that it's difficult because when a deputy pulls over a low-speed vehicle, because they're not golf carts, they're low-speed vehicles.
Right. They're not
we have pulled over golf carts recently that are not even registered.
Yeah.
They are not allowed on any Walton County roadway, but a low-speed vehicle is the same as a vehicle.
Yeah, correct.
So when they do a traffic stop,
Yeah, it
they're
doesn't
not
say low speed
delineating
vehicle. Yeah,
between
right.
a vehicle
But I
and a
want to
low-speed
look at
vehicle.
there were several hundred.
Oh, yeah.
There were several hundreds.
In like a week.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Yeah.
There's a bunch.
There is a lot, but AJ, I will engage with. We have a lieutenant that's in criminal analysis, and I think he might be able to help me out with that. So I will add them to the spring break numbers. One of your lieutenants just texted me and said it's actually Atlanta next week.
Got it.
Houston was a couple of weeks ago, so
I got
we're
it.
going into
Atlanta. Had them
Atlanta
converse,
week.
the reverse. Gotcha.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Michael Brannon, what is the latest on the search for the missing football coach Chris Smelly in the Gulf? I believe that the Coast Guard is out there doing grid patterns. We have
They have a helicopter up that's flying as well too.
Yeah.
Yeah, boat and helicopter.
And yeah, we have assets. FWC has people in the water, South Walton Fire District, and our people are out there. So we'll keep everyone posted as the night goes on. Kate Niece Fletcher, how is the county preventing ghost chairs given the recent policy changes and the Walton County vendor managed beach program?
So I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have anything to do with that. I'm not exactly sure about that. You'd have to ask code enforcement or a request from the county because that's just not something we address.
Kimberlina T, no question. Thank you for adding deputies on Highway 20 West. People drive really crazy, and the road is insane.
Yes.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Okay. Don, sorry, I'm looking for questions. Okay. Don Schrampfer. If a private beach owner intentionally blocks the wet sand pathway with kayaks, large mounds of sand, or anything else, is that a violation?
Yeah, they can't do that. They can't block your access through the wet sand. So if that happens, you need to call the sheriff's office, and we'll have a deputy or somebody go down there and address that. They can't do that.
Okay. Mitchell Miller, if you are on your property, let's say cutting your grass, your next door neighbor walks from their garage to where you're standing right at the property, still inside the line. Your next door neighbor walks away from the garage about 60 feet to the property line and slaps me. Is that considered battery, even though the neighbor never crosses
Yeah, that's battery.
the property line?
Yeah, it's battery.
Okay.
It's battery.
Battery does not know property limits.
That's correct.
Gina Bilbrey, do you think motorcycle riders will be required to wear helmets, be a law in Florida anytime soon?
No, it actually was the law, and they took it away. So for years it was the law, and they actually took it back. So no, I don't see that. I haven't even heard anybody voice that legislatively in the last few years.
Okay.
But you do have to wear a seatbelt.
Yes, which is kind of bizarre, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's a good law, but it's interesting.
It is a good law, I think, but it's interesting. Stephanie Renee Whitney.
Okay.
The beach bosses harassing us in the wet sand need to be addressed. I was jogging and was approached very aggressively. I'm 4'10", and he was a big dude. It was earlier this morning.
The beach, what did she say?
The beach bosses harassing us in the wet sand.
Ball. Can she elaborate on the ball, just so I understand what we're...
Yeah, was it a security guard? Was
an
it
owner
a
or what? That's
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, how childish is that? If somebody's running down the beach, why is somebody even concerned with that, right? I mean, they should let somebody run down the beach, but this is the problem. This is exactly the problem we feared and we talked about. I think most property owners, quite frankly, don't care. But the security guard situation down there is completely out of hand. It's going to get out of hand here.
Yeah.
And that's not me knocking security companies or anything else. It's just it's a fact.
Ted Brown, what was the outcome of Sergeant Bennett interacting with the golf cart visitor? Did she call to complain? She actually did not call to complain. She reached out to the agency to extend her apologies to Sergeant Bennett. But no, she did not call to complain. That golf cart was not registered, so it was not even a low-speed vehicle.
Yeah, it was a golf cart.
It was a golf cart from Sandestin, and it was on the sidewalk, and they ended up towing it.
Yeah.
That was the outcome to that. Okay.
Listen, people let their tempers get the better of them. It doesn't make it okay, but it happens. So.
Yeah. Laura Gould, if people are driving golf carts, and I think she means low-speed vehicles, are slowing down traffic or holding up traffic, should they have to move out of the way or face fines?
So they can't impede the flow of traffic. They have to be able to go a minimum speed depending on what the roadway is. So the problem is most people tend to drive faster than the minimum.
Yeah.
So the short version is, that they're in my opinion, they're impeding traffic in some ways, depending where you're at. The county was putting in some pullover spots down on 30A for that. Maybe that'll get used more. I think that's the courteous thing to do. I think it makes sense to do it, but it's not necessarily legally mandated for them to do it.
Yeah, and you have to have observational awareness for
absolutely.
that. Yeah. And I think the LSVs are required to go up to a certain speed, correct?
It's like 25 miles
and
an
some
hour.
of them really never get up to that speed.
Yeah, they don't, but keep in mind, they don't have to drive the maximum speed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Kim Lynn said, shout out to Sergeant Bennett, AKA Deputy Dog, for his professionalism when pulled over. He pulled over the golf cart the other day. Jake Williams, why is code enforcement not required to have license plates on their LSVs? They traverse on public roadways from time to time.
They should traverse in crossing, so that would be my only. I don't know that they did or didn't. I haven't seen that before, so I'm not sure. They probably don't have low-speed vehicles either. They probably have like Polaris. I don't even know what they have, to be honest with you. Okay. So if they're going to be on the roadway, it has to meet the Florida law. There's no exemption for that. Our vehicles here have tags on them.
Yeah, our LSV has a tag.
Our LSV has a tag on it, correct.
And our side-by-sides.
And our side-by-sides, if they're on the road, if they're roadworthy, not all of them meet the requirements to be on the road.
Daniel Brock, the deputies are awesome. I often brag about how chill and level-headed they are about traffic stops for locals. Moved here from Atlanta suburbs 8 years ago. Love your agency's attitude, demeanor. Yeah, I mean,
we try. Thank you. We try to hire character and we teach skills. That's it. We try and hire character. We teach skills.
Lena Miller Powers, what are ghost chairs?
I believe ghost chairs, as I understand it, are chairs that are put up by vendors, but there's nobody actually renting it, so it takes up a space along typically on private property, is what I understand. But again, that's not something I normally deal with. I know people are really unhappy about it, about chairs.
Yeah.
About those chairs, about the way they're set up. But
yeah.
You know what sounds like an easy answer to all this and solve that problem? Go put a chair up when it's rented. Don't put a chair out until it's rented. But maybe that's not. I could be missing something.
Yeah. Dustin Hostetler, it's my understanding, according to Florida statute 843.08, that it's illegal for private security on the beach to impersonate a law enforcement official. It's a third-degree felony. Is the sheriff's office going to uphold that statute?
So understand what the definition of impersonate a law enforcement officer. Having a badge doesn't mean that you're impersonating a law enforcement officer. They're allowed to have certain identifications under Florida law, under the security license. They have to represent themselves, i.e. say this, in such a manner that they are advertising themselves as police officers. So I understand what you're saying but that's the perception they're giving in the way they're dressed. So that's a short version of that. But they have to take action in such a manner that they're misrepresenting themselves or intentionally, maliciously doing that to violate 844.
Okay.
Saying I'm going to arrest you. Saying identifying yourself as a police officer or a deputy sheriff.
Okay. Alicia Schnitzer, if we have the handle with care sticker on our vehicle, would other counties throughout Florida recognize that program and know what to do in an emergency situation?
Unfortunately, no, they do not. However, we working with some folks out of Santa Rosa County, they tried, I shouldn't say we, they were trying, Sheriff Johnson and I talked about this, they were trying to get a statewide law passed.
Called the SAFE, right? SAFE.
I think it was called SAFE, where we could enter it with your tag anywhere in the state, that didn't happen. I don't know what the resistance to that was.
It
but
didn't pass legislature.
It did not pass the Florida legislature, but hopefully this passes next time, and we'll roll handle and care into that. So I'm optimistic that may come in the future, and I think it should be absolutely statewide.
Okay. Kristen Jones, I'm sorry, Kirsten, I believe. Sorry, Kirsten. If a beachfront homeowner has hired private security, and that security guard tells you that you cannot be in the wet sand,
They're wrong.
can you press charges on them for harassment if they continue to badger you in the wet sand?
So two things. One, what you would definitely go ahead and call the sheriff's office. Let us come down there and handle and mediate that. So that's not a necessarily immediately arrestable offense, right? It needs to be addressed and handled. Now, if they continue that after they've been warned to do that, then yes, we can address that. But the short version is go ahead and just call us right then. If you're having that kind of conflict, go ahead and call.
Okay.
I mean, that is what we're here for, and we're doing this a lot right now.
Okay. Jennifer Doan, why can tax dollars, public tax dollars, be used to have security along private beaches?
It can't.
It can't.
We don't provide security on private beaches. That's not accurate.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, all of the beach down in the water is sovereign to the state of Florida, and so there's a lot of public beach up and down the beach. You just don't necessarily know where it's at, and there lies the problem. But there's public beach up and down there. So think of it this way. You got to be careful how you phrase that, because it'd be like, well, if somebody walked in your front yard, why would a deputy sheriff go protect your private property? The law contemplates it exactly the same. They don't treat it any different, whether it's your front yard or it's the beach. I understand that's different when you walk up and down the beach. Things are different. Say it again. It's not what I like. It's what the law is in this standpoint. But no, we don't do private security for those folks.
Okay. Folks that are just tuning in, we've talked about Chris Smelly, the kayaker that went missing off Grayton this morning. We have a multi-agency search going on the beach right now. He is still missing as of this moment, but we have a multi-agency search, continuing, and we'll continue to update you guys on our social for that. Okay, Chris Sebastian, have all public funds that take care of what are now being called private beaches being allocated somewhere else? I'm not sure what.
I don't know any public funds that were being used or allocated to take care of private beaches. So I'm going to be careful how I say this, but I think that's accurate. I don't know of any money that was spent on private beaches by the public from that regard.
Okay.
If I'm wrong, I could be completely wrong about that. I just simply don't. I'm not aware of any taxpayer money that were used there.
Tracy Cook, by putting officers on the beach to answer trespassing calls, is it putting a strain on having officers patrolling streets and land properties?
Sure.
I think she means deputies.
Yeah,
she means
for
deputies.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Having to monitor disputes down there at the rate we're having to do this now is a problem. It's problematic. It's not a good. You can just, for the people that are listening, if you go back and look at the number of people that have asked us about this, right? This tells you that there's a tremendous public interest in this, and there has been a public interest for over a year, several years.
For longer
for
than
long
that,
that.
yeah.
And we've tried to repeatedly warn both the public and the legislative bodies that this was a problem. This is going to be a problem. And, everybody does what they're going to do, and then they leave. And the only people left dealing with this are the sheriff's office. And so we're going to have to try and protect the public's rights, their access to the public beach, and at the same time be cognizant of what our legal responsibilities are. So, yeah, it's a real problem. Yeah. But it didn't just get that way. It's just now becoming, truly public. But we've been, saying this. I remember, if some of you guys will remember, probably 3 or 4 years ago, we had a public meeting, 700 people, when that Florida bill was passed, when the House bill was passed, and I don't remember the number, whatever it is, that kind of started this ball rolling. We had about several hundred people in the auditorium at South Walton, and we talked about this, the warning of where this was, where this was going. That's not me proffering an opinion on it. I'm just telling you this. We knew this was going to happen. And so for people to say now, either be they in legislative bodies or governmental bodies, to say they didn't know or don't, that's disingenuous. If somebody's telling you that, that's disingenuous, because we've been talking about this. And
to follow up on her question, I think that's why we've we've added the beach community service officers to help answer questions on the beach, to help explain what's happening and go out there.
And so the idea behind beach community service officers was to not have a armed deputy sheriff coming from a command presence sort of way, but to come at this as informational where we can, and try to be public service and customer service oriented in regard to that. But we understand the public doesn't like this. The public's not happy. Totally get that.
Yeah. Really puts us in a tough spot.
Yeah. It's not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah. Jake Williams has a great question.
Come on with it, Jake.
Question about the new squatting laws. Can you remove someone from inside of a residence if requested by the owner? And we actually had an arrest this week, which is it's just kind of serendipitous how this all happened. Ron DeSantis passed the House bill. I think today he signed it about the squatters, but we removed a woman a couple days ago.
There's a couple of the short version is yes. The short version is yes, and we do that. That's not uncommon. But understand the difference between squatting and an established relationship. So if you allow someone to stay there, and they contribute to the rent, the household, the bills, something like that, then you've created a civil transaction. Then it becomes that becomes problematic. Then you have to go through the eviction process. Even if they only paid a small amount toward the rent, or maybe their lease is up or whatever. So there's a distinction between trespassing.
Or burglary, quite frankly.
Or burglary, or what you would call squatting from that standpoint. But yeah, we can absolutely remove squatting. We do that quite honestly, we do that.
Yeah,
we've already been doing that, so it wasn't a real big change from our standpoint.
Yeah. Not to be confused with squatted trucks. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, right.
We've had quite the influx of those here lately. I think I'm kind of getting up to speed on some of the questions that we're having, and make sure I'm going to kind of go over some of these because we've answered some of them. So if you see me kind of catching up and I haven't answered your question, just please repeat it. Renee Thorne White wanted to know if Chris had a cell phone or a watch. And from what I'm being told, once you're offshore quite a ways, you don't have signal on those devices. Can a non-licensed adult operate an LSV?
Not on the roadway, no.
No. Lori Derbyshire. So
it's just like a car. So an LSV, for all practical purposes, is like a car but can only go on limited roadways. It cannot go on highways or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to. There's a lot of people asking about Chris. Okay. Trish Day Leclerc. There is a man who posts on social media about a drug house on Country Club Drive, and he claims you've been out over 100 times to this house, and they are hauling dead bodies out. Is there any truth to this?
Short version is there is a house that's been a nuisance house for a number of years that we've dealt with. We've not been hauling dead bodies out. Have somebody overdosed there before? Yes, they absolutely have. Is it something where I think a nuisance
abatement
would be good? Yeah, I absolutely think a nuisance abatement would be really good. I'm actually dealing with a similar case not similar in a different manner. That doesn't make sense. Similar in a different manner. Anyway, another nuisance abatement issue over in Blue Mountain where there's a house in a residential neighborhood that sleeps 30 people, right? And we've been called out to that a bunch of times. Mm-hmm. It's the same kind of thing when you continually have to go out to these places because of problems. I got to be careful calling, where something is a drug house. That's where a group of users live doesn't necessarily make it a drug house where you deal drugs out of. You do have people that are clearly have drug addictions that are in certain areas that we get tired of going out there as well too. And I think there's a lot of I think there could be better civil remedies that would help clean up some of that. So yeah, I think a nuisance abatement will work well. But I am familiar with that residence area. We've been over there a bunch. I wouldn't say we've been there 100 times. We've been there a bunch. And we certainly haven't hauled out a truckload of bodies. But we've had medical calls and we've had people OD there before.
Mm-hmm. Elizabeth Parker had an opportunity to catch up on your podcasts, and I really enjoyed them. What's up next? We are about to publish our trespassing versus restraining order.
Yeah, okay.
That's episode 5. And then we've got a couple more topics that we want to cover. But if you have something that you want us to talk about, feel free. We're all ears. That's why we started the Art of Policing, really, was to hit some topics that we commonly got asked about.
Yeah, if there's something you want to know about and you want us to do a deep dive in, just, send Corey an email, send us an email, and we'll do the research. If I don't know it, we'll do the research and try and put something out in layman's terms so you can maybe have something of value. But I think we get a lot of questions about the difference between trespassing and restraining orders. People use those terms interchangeably, and they're frankly not even really even related. But that's okay. We'll kind of talk through some of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Was there any arrest made on the tragic hit and run on Highway 98? Florida Highway Patrol worked
there
that
were,
crash.
but I would say a suspect was identified almost immediately. So we identified a suspect. We've turned that name over to the Highway Patrol, and they are taking care of it.
Yeah, it's there.
I would suggest an arrest will be coming at some point.
Great. What is Whitney wants to know what the fine is for setting up on the dry sand on a private beach. Like, are we issuing fines, or would
we haven't been issuing fines. We're not.
Okay.
Again, we're operating on the belief that most people, if there's a dispute, and again, just because somebody says they own it, they may not own to where they say they own it, right? So we have to go there and we have to confirm that, because the county, as part of the settlement, is supposed to put out a survey for every piece of property. That hasn't been done yet, right? So for us, we're having to work off the surveys we have for those places that have been done. And it's misleading when you look at the map on the property appraiser's office, because that can show red all the way into the water in some places, and some places it doesn't show where the property line. So it's cannot just rely on that. So if you say, listen, I don't think that you own this property, you can call a deputy or a beach community service, and we're going to come down there and try and determine first, is that public beach? There is a lot of public beach. Some of it is very hard to get to unless you're walking down, through the wet sand. So the one that always comes to mind is down here at, I'm going to blank out now, right before we get to Topsail, but it's an access that walks out through private property, right?
And you have to
get
go
the
down
water,
to this.
and then you have to go down another, 100 yards, and then there's a big chunk of public beach. So, really, we're talking about signs, and I'm not saying we should be putting up signs everywhere, but the citizens have a right to know where the public beach is at. Mm-hmm. And there is actually quite a bit of public beach. It's just identifying it. It needs to be identified for the public.
Sure. Okay. Tom Girolami, we need to take our beaches back. What would we need to get a permit to do a protest walk down the wet sand?
So I'm going to short answer you. I'm not sure that requires a permit to walk down the wet sand, would be my take. Now, don't hold me to that. I need to double check that. A lot of that depends on the size and what we're talking about. But, again, I would say I would also reach out to my county commissioners and my state legislator and state senators. Those are the folks that have the most ability to impact this or change something with it. Now, they're currently bound by the law, so I just want to be real clear. I don't know what they essentially would have only a couple of options. One is renourishment, which is what happened west of Topsail. This is why we don't have problems west of Topsail, because the beaches were renourished. That becomes sovereign to the state of Florida, but it leaves the private property owner with their private property, right? So that's option one. Option two is something called eminent domain, which is, they say, since it's no value, or a minimal value, then the county says there's a compelling public interest. That's the only two options I've ever heard voiced. I don't know what other options are available, but those really, the people you need to talk to about this are the Board of County Commissioners and or your state representation. That's really where it's at. I couldn't change it if I felt 100% against one way or the other for it. I have no ability to change that.
The question we were asked before that, the access that you were trying to remember, is Stallworth.
Stallworth. So Stallworth doesn't even go all the way down to the water as an access, right?
It's really
but you have
tough.
to go to Stallworth and then go east, and I think it's probably maybe 100 yards, something like that.
I thought it was west.
I'm sorry, west to the west from Stallworth to get to this large piece of public. But you can't even drive your vehicle down there to it because there's no parking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that kind of stuff that infuriates me, but there's nothing I can do about that.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay. Sorry, there's a lot of these questions that we've addressed, so I'm just going to start going to some with that haven't been asked.
Okay.
Anthony on YouTube is asking, I have a situation concerning a civil matter with Argyle Water Department. Who does he reach out to about that? Does Argyle have a water department?
Yes, they do. I apologize. I actually don't know the answer to that, but I'll get you, if you'll email us that, we'll get you a contact with somebody that either is with Argyle or their legal representation or somebody so they can.
Okay.
I used to know those board members, but I apologize. I don't anymore.
Yeah, Anthony, our email is pio@waltonso.org. PIO stands for Public Information Officer. Rich Allison, who is the rotation wrecker for all of the LSVs? I think, just as you said, Rich, I think there are several wrecker services that are on rotation for those.
Yeah, I'm not 100%
I don't think there's one.
Yeah, there's multiple.
And
actually.
I can get you that information.
We use, just so you know, we use the FHP, the Florida Highway Patrol tow rotation list. That's kind of how we do it.
Yeah. Okay. Kevin Savidra says, can I drive a side-by-side with a Montana tag? Can it be registered in Montana?
No, it's got to be roadworthy. It's got to be Florida requirements.
Sorry. Karen Chapman. Hi, Sheriff Adkinson. I understand that we have a noise ordinance in South Walton. Is it true that if I hear music between 6 to 10 p.m. inside my house with all the windows and doors closed, is it illegal and too loud? I believe the noise ordinance covers between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Correct, between 10 and 6. And it's basically set on what's called a reasonableness standard, right? So what's reasonable? If you're sitting in your house and you hear music inside of your house and it's depriving you of the enjoyment of your home, it's too loud, right? And so you can call a deputy, and a deputy will go out there and ask them to turn it down. So the way this generally works is if we have to come back out again, we may or may, if we don't get compliance, we're up to making an arrest. So we can issue a citation and or make an arrest depending on what happens. But Ms. Chapman, so you have to understand you also have to have a named complainant. The deputy cannot be disturbed by the music. So it has to be somebody that puts their name beside it and says, this music is disturbing me, if you want us to take further action, right? If you want us just to go out there and turn it down, you can be anonymous. That's fine. Just call and say, look, the music's loud. And the deputy gets there, they have to hear it. They have to hear they have to personally witness it. And they'll tell them turn it down. So we look for compliance is what we're trying to get.
Yeah.
And by the way, let's talk about reasonable a second. Reasonable, it can't be, mowing your neighbor mowing their grass at 10 o'clock on a Saturday is reasonable. Even if you can hear it in the house, it's reasonable.
In the morning.
Right?
10 o'clock
in the morning. Completely reasonable. 3 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, not reasonable. Same activity, but you change the time and make it less reasonable. Yeah. And so that's really kind of the short thumbnail version of that.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head, though. I think that most of the time what's frustrating for us is that people want to call in noise complaints, but then they don't want to give their name.
Yeah, exactly. Which is fine, but if we go back out the second time and then this time you give me a name, I can't make an arrest or issue a citation until I have, they have to be given the warning with a name. So you could make me do it 3 times. In other words, if you go anonymous the first time, but then the second time you give your name, we're going to go out there. And as long as we're getting compliance, that's what we're trying to do. But nobody wants to keep going back out there, us included. So
yeah,
want us to kind of resolve that.
Okay. Tim White, do you feel the private versus public beach issue will cause less tourists to be inclined to come to South Walton? From a service industry standpoint, it seems as if so far March tourism has been down, which could be an economy issue as well.
Well, it's a great question. Mr. White, I don't feel educated enough to know the answer to that yet. I think that a lot of that depends on how this spills out the rest of the season. I can tell you that if we start dealing with security guards, and again, I'm not just picking on them, but if we start having conflict on the beach between the public and private repeatedly, yeah, I think there's some impact to that. I don't see how there couldn't be. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I hope not. I hope we get this resolved. And again, that's why we're trying to, be as informational as we can and try and help the public find places. But I think the sooner we can identify these really, and there are some really pretty big places of that are open to the public, but you've got to know how to get to them, and you got to know where they're at. The TDC is supposed to be working on that, I believe.
Okay. Going back to the Argyle water question from YouTube,
Okay.
Can I get help from law enforcement if I have a valid complaint?
Yeah, if it's a criminal matter, we can document a civil matter depending on what's going on. But yeah, just call a deputy out there and let us listen to it, and we'll see if we can get you pointed in the right direction.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, looking for. Okay. Ollie Walker.
Okay.
Hi, Ollie. So sorry joining late. Thank you so much for the strong deputy presence during spring break. It's really noticed and hopefully getting the message out that 30A is family friendly. A couple of questions. Okay. Can we have a deputy on 30A between the beginning of Seagrove and 395 to address LSVs during driving with infants in laps? I passed 3 yesterday and 1 on Sunday.
That drives me nuts. I can promise you anyone we can see is going to get a ticket.
Yeah.
They're going to get stopped and they're going to get a ticket. That is endangerment of those children and should be addressed.
Yeah. And our folks have really been hitting it hard down there for LSVs.
The problem is it's a different group of people every week.
Yes.
So every week, so you may get the picture while you're down here, but then the next week they're from somewhere else.
It's a totally different group.
It's totally different.
Yeah. Any additional plans for this coming Saturday through next week, which I believe is potentially going to be our busiest spring break week?
Yeah, it's going to be our busiest spring break. You know, I think we've spent $600,000 just in overtime managing this period of time. There's a lot of people working. We're not going to take our foot off the gas, and there's quite frankly, there's nobody else for me to put to work with it from this point. We have to be able to do other things. There are things going on in the county besides spring break, and so there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of staff out there working.
And keep in mind, I'm looking at questions from 601. Okay, so I'm kind of sifting through these. So if we've already answered some of them, I'm gonna kind of skip over them to find a question that we haven't answered yet. Ben and Christina Smith, how can the sheriff's office help parents of underage teens fight the vape epidemic when these kids can walk in particular stores and purchase them without any form of ID?
So I will say this, if you can tell us what store is doing that, if you want to email us, let us know. Our district lieutenants will do 2 things. One, on occasion, we get with the Bureau of Alcohol, Beverage, and Tobacco here in the state of Florida and we'll run spot checks through there. Same thing we do with underage drinking and something. So if you know a specific entity that's having this problem, if you'll email us, let us know which one it is. And we'll try and set something up and go through. We've done that on numerous occasions with alcohol, so it's a good time to be doing this with the vape situation as well.
Yeah, so
that's actually a good suggestion.
Kate Fletcher wants to know which body governs code compliance at the Walton County Sheriff's Office. We don't.
No, which body is the Board of County Commissioners. Board of County Commissioners.
Okay, Linda Moore. With the number of visitors to the area and the lack of adequate planning to accommodate the influx of tourists and people relocating, the cell towers are inadequate and we cannot reliably make phone calls. Regular text also is impossible when networks are overloaded.
True.
CenturyLink has been down, so Wi-Fi is also impossible to count on.
True.
Can you please consider launching a public service campaign to instruct people that it is possible to text 911 for emergency assistance?
So we'll do that again. We've done that a couple of different times. We will do it again. I will tell you something that you may find interesting that may have some relief to this in sight. So in 2000, give or take 5 or 6, the county looked at building a new public safety radio system. And at the time, there was the idea that they needed something like 12 to 13 towers. But they ended up only building 3, right? So we've been very short on towers. We are at the point of building a new radio system. And part of that radio system, we did a study of how many towers are needed, right? And we're going out for what's called an invitation to negotiate. In other words, we are putting out a contract for somebody to come and build towers. Of those are a request of 18 towers to be built. So it's about a $20 million project. It's $40 million for the whole project, but roughly $20 million just in towers. And one of the things that we will consider at some point is a public-private partnership. So the public safety, the fire, the EMS, the state of Florida, we need a certain amount of space on that tower. Past that, it's possible that that space gets rented to other cellular providers, where either the county can generate some kind of income, or the converse, where a private entity builds the tower and guarantees us space, maybe leasing county property. So maybe when this thing is done in the next year and a half, that we are going to have significantly more towers, which would improve, and these are taller towers, which would significantly improve data and cell phone transmission. We hope. That's the plan.
But Linda, to answer your question, I will make sure that we're pushing some stuff out that lets people know that we do have the text to 911 capability. We haven't highlighted that in the past, and I'd love to keep pushing it. She also asked about how we plan to evacuate people in the event of a hurricane, now that there's such a huge influx of people in the county.
So we have a pretty detailed plan on how to evacuate. But I will tell you, part of that comes with personal responsibility. And I mean, I hate to be too blunt, but to say it this way, there'll be notices given, hours, 48 hours plus in advance. The problem for us comes when someone decides, I'm not going to go. Mm-hmm. Free country, I'm not going to go. And then at the last minute goes, oh, wow, I really need to go. This is bad.
Yeah. Then
it's too late, because there's certain wind speed, I'm going to shut those bridges down, right? Yeah. And I don't have any choice. I'm going to do that. You saw what happened with the bridges in Baltimore this week, and I realized that was a big ship hitting that. However, there are wind load speeds on this thing for a reason.
Yeah.
There is a plan. We do something called contraflow, which is we change the direction of the flow of traffic. But if you live south of the base specifically, you have to cross a bridge east, west, or north to get out of South Walton.
Yeah.
Right? And so we want to be real clear that those warnings, when they're issued, we just want people to adhere to them. But there's a pretty good plan in place for that, and we've used it a number of times over the years.
Okay. Eric Alexander, has there been any consideration of bringing back the idea of a motorcycle patrol, especially for LSVs?
Yeah, a couple of different times, Eric, is that we have looked at trying to get folks. We didn't have any takers last time. We advertised, I think, about 6 or 8 months ago. We didn't have any deputies that were interested at that point. We may look again. We went as far as pricing the motorcycles a couple of times. Right now, it's been priority just get staffing, hiring with the beach issue and trying to deal with that first. But I think, yes, ultimately, you'll see that. We do have traffic units now, which we did not have in the past, which is pretty good. We got 4 people out working traffic now, and they've had a real impact. So short answer is yes. Over the long term, I see them coming.
Okay. Bobby Rogers is asking how you feel about Judge Green quiet titling beachfront properties.
Well, I don't know that it's a matter of the judge has to follow the law just like the rest of us too. We're bound by certain things, and so if it's something you dislike or don't want to do, somebody either has to challenge it, right, or the law has to be changed. I guess you can blame anybody for anything, but the truth of the matter is, judges, just like me and anybody else, I'm bound to follow my orders. I swore to follow a set of orders, just like the judges did. And whether I like them or not is not a relevant statement for me. I don't know anything about I don't know anything about the process of quieting titles, but I do know that Judge Green is incredibly ethical and somebody I have a tremendous amount of respect for. So I can guarantee this, that if he did it, it was above board and done correctly. But remember, just because I don't like something or we don't like something doesn't make it illegal. So, there are ways that as I understand it, you can search the clerk of court system and you can find out how many of these things are in process, and then try and look to, what the options are. I just don't know that.
Okay.
But that's something maybe, we can ask the board or our state representative. I spoke to our representative this last week. He's very engaged. He understands this is an issue. So.
Matthew O. Perkins, is there a new law for squatted trucks? It's getting a little bit out of hand.
I have not seen it. The law really has to do with the height of the headlights and the front bumper, which I'd be blunt with you, I don't know off the top of my head, but most of them do not violate as I understand. So I have not seen a new law.
Okay. Right. Sorry, I'm trying to, like I said, I'm still on questions from 1805, which is 605. So,
well, we don't get paid overtime, so we're going to answer your questions.
And I'm just trying to catch up.
It takes us a minute.
Thank you, Paige Barker. She's complimenting Lindsay and I's Facebook presence. Faya Ann wants to know if tax dollars pay for the beach community service officers.
Yeah, so they actually they do. It's tourist development tax dollars. So tourist tax dollars pay for those. The bed tax is what's paying for that.
So explain what a bed
Yeah,
tax
bed
is.
tax is amount paid by a tourist when they come to this county. A certain percent of it is set aside statutorily for certain things, advertising for to continuation of tourism, basically. You know, that's a short word. I'm sure I'm saying something wrong about that. But yeah, that money does not come out of general revenue. It comes out of TDC funds.
Okay. Philip Canterbury, spring break and summer vacations. How much of the problem is underage people using fake IDs, and does the retail have to give the IDs back?
No,
So
they
if they
don't
get
have to
caught
get
with
that.
them.
No, they can absolutely hold the ID and turn over to us. I mean, underage drinking is a major problem, but really we have kind of two separate areas of problem. We're having a lot of problem with, I would call 15, 16-year-olds, where everybody comes down here and they open the door of the Suburban, and then our kids are running around and screaming. That can be incredibly annoying. It's not necessarily illegal, right? And then you have, obviously, alcohol problems. And it's primarily, I would say, best I can tell, coming from parents and people bringing it with them, right? So that's an issue. Our stores, we work pretty hard with our local stores trying to deal with that as much as we can. But I think a lot of it is coming from the parents, if I'm being honest.
Sure.
We've arrested a bunch. We've issued notice to appears to a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
A bunch of kids.
Faye Ann, how many of these community service officers have been hired to deal with the public-private beach matters?
Only 10, and we did not hire more than 10 because we need to figure out how this is going to work. Do we need more deputies to manage it? Do we need more beach community service officers? What is the right number? And I just, honest to God, don't know the answer to that yet. We're just having to feel our way through this right now.
Yeah. Dave Meadows, could we have another live Q&A with a representative from a beach vending company and a code enforcement officer to answer questions you might not know the answer to?
Sure, maybe a great idea for those two. We just to be clear, we invited everybody last time, and we will invite again. We don't mind doing that. We don't mind facilitating a meeting for the public again if there was some value to that. The only thing that I would say when we do that, if it's just to come and say that you hate the new law, I don't. Again, not have an opinion on that, but I can't change it, you know. And so I want to be careful that it didn't become just stand up and all shake our head. Yes, we need to do something, and we don't like it. It doesn't matter whether I agree or disagree with you. I can't do anything then, but I do think that code enforcement and your vendors would probably be a great opportunity to have them, and maybe some of your county commissioners to sit there and kind of hear the gist of it. I don't know a lot of the stuff about code enforcement. I don't deal with that. I think Tony Corman is back running that as well and Tony was the former acting deputy county administrator and acting county administrator at one point. So I think as Mr. Sunday's the new county administrator, and I think as he gets his wheels kind of back under him and you know, they start hiring some folks, we'll see where that thing goes. But I will put that in a suggestion for them. So that was a long way of saying yes, I think it's a good idea. Sorry.
Okay. Bo Martin, if asked to leave a private beach, can we request to see a copy of the deed and proof that the security has direct authorization to represent the homeowner?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Now, you know, let me caveat that before I say this. If you're standing 20 feet from the toe of the dune, you probably know that it's on private property where it's at, right? Mm-hmm. But if you think it's in question, I would just say, why don't you just call the sheriff's office and let us come down there and do that? That's what you pay your taxes for. Let us get down there and try and resolve it. And that'll save conflict between the two of you. You know, we're in the conflict mitigation business. I would say don't, Mr. Martin, to just pick up the phone and call.
Yeah.
We'll come down there.
Yolanda,
we're not going to come down there and arrest you because you're sitting on its private property. So we're going to just come and resolve the issue. And then you'll know, and we'll know what the answer is.
Yolanda Decker, are the bright blue headlights illegal? They're blinding.
They are absolutely blinding. They're
Agreed.
The bane of my existence. They're not illegal. They should be illegal. They are too bright. It makes it difficult to see. Those are that is covered by what they call Big DOT, Department of Transportation. Mm-hmm. And I actually am thinking the same thing. I've noticed them being incredibly bright.
Okay.
Could not agree more.
Okay. Kathy Kent, can you address what measures were taken after the sheriff convention meeting where sheriffs were informed that the threat of terrorism was at a much higher level? How would you get information to people?
Yes, so a couple of things. What happens is there's a state, there is what's called the fusion centers, which are in all 50 states. In this state, it's run by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And so what we don't want to do is just saturate people with, if you remember after 9/11, everything was, they had these color code system, it's orange, red, and all this stuff. And it kind of lost its tolerance because every day, or lost its value because every day it was orange, right? So what happens is if there is a credible threat or a threat that's concerning, we will, from the Fusion Center, be notified, and we're going to pass that out to the public as appropriate. So yes, there is a mechanism in place to do that.
Yeah. Stephen Burnett, Highway 20 accidents that are just east of 331. Are there anything in common with them that we need to watch out for while we're driving that stretch of roadway?
That's a great question. East of 331, the one thing that we have noticed is people trying to stop and turn, particularly in that J.W. Holliton Road. That may be a little farther than you're talking about, but that is a real problem that people are stopping, and because of the dip in the road, you can't see that until you crest it, till you're on top of it. It's 2-lane, and that is a real problem. We've had multiple accidents that are related to that. That's one thing I would say is when you don't have a clear line of the roadway, it's hard. You have to almost assume there that somebody's stopping to turn, and that's a real problem.
Yeah. Okay. Terry Smith, why are we seeing these planes dragging advertising banners over 30A? Who can help stop that? It bothers the sea turtles too, I'm sure.
I don't know the answer to that. I would say that's probably the FFA. Anything that has to do with flying is almost always controlled by the FAA. I'm having problems with drones right now. We've had a lot of complaints from property owners about drones flying over their property, right? Which is not a criminal penalty, which is an issue for us. But what we've kind of found out when it comes to that stuff, two things: advertising, that is going to be controlled by your Board of County Commissioners. Anything in the actual pilot side of it, my guess, and it's just a guess, is going to deal with the FAA.
Yeah. Stephen Chansey, why did the TDC release their website map before the county beach survey was completed?
I don't have an answer to that. I don't know the answer to that.
Our Erica Lambert says, are photography permits for out-of-state photographers still being issued?
I've never even heard of a photography permit, so I apologize. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
We don't have a business license here, so I don't know how it would.
Yeah. Seth Galloway, thanks for your hard work and great service to Walton County. With the 4th of July coming, what's the new law in Walton County regarding fireworks, non-explosive versus explosive, up in the sky, etc.? I think the state has a new fireworks law.
State has a new preemptive kind of fireworks law that allows some things that were not allowed in the past. I tell you what we'll do is probably put that information out. I know that South Walton and North Walton Fire District, South Walton Fire District and North Walton Fire Rescue, we'll put both those up on our website, kind of outlining what they are. But a lot of things that used to be illegal are no longer illegal in Florida. So we'll get that up and put it up on our website as well.
Alan Schnitzer, for civilian jobs, what is the process to apply for them? They're on our website. All of our jobs are listed on our website at waltonso.org under careers, and you can see what job openings are there. Jen Warren, customary use has been eliminated on the county-wide blanket ordinance. Can individuals still claim customary use outside of the ordinance?
No.
And then a lot of people tuning in that are either friends of Coach Chris Smelly, or he teaches them, or they're just really concerned for him right now. And we're continuing our search for him on Grayton Beach, and the Coast Guard's helping us. Bay County Sheriff's Office.
The Coast Guard is handling. They are, as I understand it, a little while ago, right before I came on air, they were flying, and they had a boat out there as well too. My optimism would be that there is a flotation device, and everything that I understand that Coach Smelly is an athlete and is an experienced kayaker, we know that those things can take you out. We know the currents can be really strong here, and God willing, what's happened is he's in that kayak. He's still in that kayak. We think that's hopefully a pretty good sign. We have not found an unmanned kayak, so that's good. As far as we know, he still has that kayak, and that's where we're going to try and stay with it and keep the search on. So,
Dale Delby. Are the boys who hit and spit on sheriff's deputies still locked up? Is the DA pursuing maximum charges?
No, they're not still locked up. They're entitled to a bond under Florida law, and they were out almost immediately.
They get sent to Crestview to DJJ.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Jason on X. He's asking how does
Twitter.
Also known as
Twitter,
formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, right.
How does WCSO verify beachfront property owners when there's conflict on the beach? Actually,
glad you asked.
Yeah. How do they verify that?
So we require them to produce a survey. We want to see the legal documents, and so we've made people aware of that, and we have to be able to verify it.
Yeah.
It's a short version of it. I mean, we've got to know where those lines are.
Yeah.
We're not going to, just to be clear, we're not going to get down to this big dispute over a foot one way or the other, right? Well, I think you need to move 1 foot. think you need to move another foot. But we still need to know where that line is at.
Yeah. Coleman Butler, is there any talk of putting a bike path on East Point, Washington off of Bay Drive?
One can dream. Absolutely.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. So I understand, I shouldn't say understand. I have been told that there's going to be a continuous bike path that circles around from Bay Drive through there. Lily is going to connect most of South Walton through there. So I'm optimistic that's the case. I have not seen anything done with that, but I heard that was going to happen. You can email the county PO. The county PO should be able to tell you that. So if you'll email the Walton County Board of County Commissioners, they should be able to give you an update on that.
Yolanda Decker, with how large Walton County is, why isn't WCSO allotted more money to get more deputies? So many complain that there aren't enough, but you have to have money to hire.
So, I mean, a couple of things. One, we got a big budget, right? We're a $100 million organization, but we're bigger than just fire. We're bigger than just Leon County. We're bigger than just deputies, the jail. We are fire rescue, EMS, animal control, all those different entities, the communication system, the building of firehouses. The biggest thing that I would say now that has slowed us up is in the previous 2 years, really since COVID, we had a dramatic reduction in applications, right? That we saw a lot of applications come down post George Floyd incidents. And this is really the first year in a number of years, probably since maybe 2017, we're starting to get applications again. And so I did not, like, for instance, this year upcoming budget, we're not trying to add a bunch of staff this year in the law enforcement side. Why? Because I need to fill the positions I have, and I need to have quality applicants. We're not just going to take anybody. So we're going to take quality applicants, and we're going to make sure they're taken care of first. And it's been my experience so far, the board has been very supportive of that. They have not, we haven't had budget fights like that. I mean, they understand I'm not going to come in with something we don't need, but we have to balance. We had to do a lot to grow Walton County Fire Rescue. We added quite a number of staff. We needed more ambulances. We needed more fire vehicles, and we needed more fire stations. That stuff has to happen. We have to have people in the jail. So this year, we're potentially getting a new circuit judge here in the county. We'll have to add bailiff for those folks. That's a long way of saying this. I think that this year we're going to really concentrate on getting these positions filled before we move to add any more positions. And I believe it's been my experience that the board, by and large, has been supportive of that.
Yeah. Kate Neese Fletcher, what is the percent of beachfront homes that are privately occupied versus short-term rental properties that are involved?
I have no idea. Could not tell you. The TDC could probably tell you that.
Okay.
I actually just do not know. 900 plus pieces of property, though.
Okay. Eric Wilhelm, how do our beach visitors understand what their responsibilities are when parking on private beaches with no dispute, but choose to dig deep holes and walk away? Since documented cases of broken ankles and legs, actually, in Fort Lauderdale, they had a child get killed.
It's been...
is the property owner then liable, or does the visitor have accountability?
Wow, that's a civil law question. I would tell you that I've heard this very problem expressed by a private property owner and said, listen, they sit on air quote, my property, and they leave it, somebody falls, do they have some liability? I can't tell you they don't. There certainly is. If it's considered private property, the property owner has some level of liability in that. But the bigger part of that is we've got to stop digging these holes. We've got to stop digging these holes.
Yeah.
Got to stop this. It's just dangerous.
Okay. Paul McCorkle. Is the TDC paying for the community service officers, and why are they not hiring people to do that and not you?
Yes, they are paying. The reason that they are not hiring is because unfortunately the deputies are going to be the resolving issue with that. If there's any conflict, they're going to have to call us anyway. So what we didn't want to do is have somebody that we didn't know how they were trained, what their methodology was, what type of people they hired, that was then going to have to deputy come behind them and try and resolve the issue. So we wanted to make sure that we would dispatch them, that we understood how they were trained, and that they understood what to expect with the deputy sheriff getting there. So it's really about a continuity of services, kind of the short version of that.
Okay. Sheriff, this question's from Leanne Luttrell.
Okay.
Aren't the private beach owners tax-paying citizens too, and deserve to be protected from people targeting us?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, short version of that is I mean, I think the issue right now is there's so much emotion on both sides of it. If you're a private property owner and you've spent X number of millions of dollars buying that piece of property, and you were given a deed, you have certain expectations, right? And then whether or not one side or the other likes it is, from a sheriff's office standpoint, that's not relevant to me. I just have to make sure it's factually accurate. That's where we're at.
Yeah.
I have to make sure that we be courteous in the way we do business, but I can tell you that one side is not going to be happy, and in this deal, potentially both sides are going to be unhappy. But the short version is, again, if the property owner legally owns the property and provides a survey that shows that, then we have to treat that like private property, like anything else.
Okay. Allison Gibb. I saw a sheriff's car in the school zone at Butler Elementary this morning. Thank you. So many people driving 20 over the speed limit in the zones. And there's a lot of people walking bike to and from school.
Sure.
Butler Elementary is on 30A West. And that's a pretty busy road down there. TK Bradley, why can't, I think she means can't, why can't we have cameras and send tickets for car seat LSV violations? I think one of the biggest problems is that a lot of them are offered as amenities to large homes. Right. So unless that homeowner is going to pass along that, you've got to prove who's behind the wheel.
Exactly.
And that, that there's companies who rent out golf carts, things like that. Jeremy Powell, for those with interest in the North End, can you provide any details on operations or programs in place to address the ongoing presence of amphetamine and synthetic opiates?
Well, I'm glad you asked. We have had a couple of really successful operations here in the last week by our Vice Narcotics Unit, and I think we started earlier talking about the sentencing for some pretty large cocaine operations, but specific to the fentanyl. We had a multi-kilo arrest here in the last 30 days. Mm-hmm. Have we released that yet? No. Okay. We've got several things cooking and going as well. So yeah, we've been pretty active up there. I would dare say we've spent most of our time in regard to that north of the Bay here lately. So
yeah, our Vice Narcotics is working really hard. They've
been extremely busy.
They've had a couple federal cases.
Well, and our dog, Kenny, our new dog, has been really successful here lately. So we're pretty pleased with him. And
he's fighting for a canine March Madness Elite 8 showing.
He's earned his kibble here lately, and we've had some pretty good. We've had some pretty good interactions. We had a good run in Mossy Head this last few weeks. So we're just trying to stay at it.
Yeah. Mitchell Miller. I recently purchased a 1996 Cadillac Seville. Oh, good for you. From a retired gentleman in California, and had it shipped here. It arrived Monday. He's purchased insurance, full coverage, but he's waiting for the title so he can get it tagged. Mm-hmm. It still has the California tags on it, that the car is drivable. Does he need to wait for the title to arrive so he can register it, even though it's insured?
Yeah, I would say call the tax collector's office, let her just verify that for you for sure. I mean, from a purely criminal standpoint, we wouldn't say anything about that because from my standpoint, you're trying to be in compliance with law and you have insurance, and it is tagged in other states. You have a grace period from that. But I would feel better if you asked the tax collector about it just in regard to, I want to make sure your insurance and whatnot covers you.
Okay. Brandy, I'm sorry, I'm looking for questions. Okay, I've answered some of these. Great. Stephen Menschel. Hi, Stephen. I believe at the beginning of the season, the sheriff's office takes part in a meeting with the rental companies. With that being said, I know it's a little late in the year, but moving forward, can you mention that dogs need to be on leashes? This year, loose dogs by renters on the west end of 30A is out of control. Thank you.
Yeah, and just go ahead and call. We actually run animal control as well, too. So please just go ahead and call if you see that. And we don't want first of all, we don't want the canines, the dogs getting hurt or biting somebody or defecating. You want to be a responsible dog owner, responsible pet owner. So if you see that, go ahead and call us, and we'll send either one of our beach community service or our deputy, or until we can get an animal control folks down there. But yeah, that's a good point. You have to have a permit to have a dog on the beach. Remember, at certain places, and that's after dark, after 4, not after dark.
Okay. Michael Young, I know a lot of these short-term rentals that are owned, managed by a company. How are these businesses allowed when the area is only zoned for private? It's obviously a commercial business.
So, I mean, again, that is at the purview of the Board of County Commissioners and the legislative body, the state Florida legislature. I've seen one in the last week. I spoke to a resident this week where there was literally a place advertising 30 people staying there, and it's in a dead-end residential neighborhood. There's no way, even if the renters were being courteous, basically where the pool is at, the way this thing is built, there's no way that there's not going to be a disturbance. So the second it was built, it was going to be a problem. I don't know how you can build these things in residential areas. There has to be some kind of balance to this. Mm-hmm. But little summer to the beach, and it's not making an excuse, just not something I have any say or control over. That's something you need to address with your county commissioners.
Okay. Todd Martin, Sheriff, what are you all using at the wet sand to determine when a beachfront owner tries to throw someone off their beach? Many think the wet sand means in the water, and it doesn't, correct?
No, it does not. It would be easier if you say the wave line. Easier to say the wave line. Wherever the wave line's at when you're standing there, that's where so, in other words, if the beach is still wet from high tide from 6 hours before daylight, that's not where the wet sand's at from that standpoint. It's really where the wave line is at. That's the easiest and best way to talk about where, because that property is sovereign to the state of Florida.
Okay.
Now, in places that are part of the settlement, there's an additional 20 feet on top of that, right?
But those are not.
Those are not contiguous to each other. Mm-hmm. There's 240 pieces of property that are part of that settlement.
And those are east of Topsail.
And those are all east of Topsail. But wherever the wave line is at, and that's probably the term, we need to stop using wet sand. In fact, I should have broken myself from that. It's in the wave line is the short way of putting it.
Okay.
Where it's at when you're there.
Okay. As you can see, this is a really complicated issue.
It's important to people. I get it. I understand. Here's the thing I think, somebody was saying a minute ago. I understand the private property owner's concern. I understand the public's concern. At the end of the day, I'm bound by the law. And I hear so many people dissatisfied with this. I guess my point of frustration is this should not come as a surprise to anybody, because we have been saying repeatedly this was going to be an issue for several years. And now, if you have a level of dissatisfaction with this, and I actually think both sides are dissatisfied. I don't think the private property owners are happy, and I don't think the public, I know, is not happy. And the truth is, if you are in favor of open beaches for everyone, you think that I'm a jackbooted thug, hired security for a private beach owner. If you are a private property owner, you think that I'm a communist trying to take your property and give it to other people. Nobody's going to be happy with us because we're the enforcement arm of this thing.
And what's really sad about it is that the deputies are put in a position where they have to be in the middle.
Yeah, the deputies and the beach community service officer we're absolutely in the middle, but that's okay. We're in the conflict business. I mean, we'll deal with that. But I do think that there has to be a better way to do this. There just has to be a better way to do this.
Okay.
But one thing I have seen, and I would point this out because one of the ladies mentioned this. One of the things that's happened now is people are trying to spark conflict so they can videotape part of it, right, and then put it out and say, "Oh, look at this guy acting this way. Look at this Karen. Look at this." Because people love that stuff. I don't understand their love of seeing other people distressed, but people love to do that, and they're not telling you the complete story, right? So they're instigating a situation, and then everybody says, "Oh, I agree with your position," but you may not have all the facts, and that actually concerns me. But I think that speaks to society as a whole. Unfortunately, people love that kind of stuff.
Okay. Shannon Truitt, on YouTube, do you mind talking about Sign Up, Stand Out? There were a lot of people on Facebook last week asking about signs. The Sign Up, Stand Out program is our program where we install
For the 911 address that Walton County Fire Rescue was putting.
And that information's on our website.
Yeah. I think, Lindsay, you were intimately involved in that. You want to touch on that just real quick?
Yeah, so there's, like Corey said, there's a link on our website where you can go to sign up, and I can comment the link on YouTube, I believe you said, right?
Yeah.
I can comment the link, and you just sign up and give us your address as long as you're in Walton County, and they'll come out and put a reflective sign on your property so that in the event of an emergency, deputies, firefighters, EMS can find your home quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It says, and on our website, it's under community and then community programs, and it's called Sign Up, Stand Out. And I think what's critical there is in the rural areas, it's sometimes very hard to see these homes from the road.
Yeah, and that's actually true on both ends of the county. Quite frankly, it's a problem. But we asked the TDC to put numbers on these beach accesses as well. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell you the name of all the beach accesses, and I think our visitors would be hard pressed to know where these access points are at.
Well, and especially in the event of an emergency, you just want to be able to look around.
And there's too much writing on those signs, so they're going to put numbers. We've asked the board; they're going to put numbers on the top of those signs that are large and in red, so that we can do something.
Yeah, they put large reflective house numbers on there. It's especially beneficial too for people, like y'all said, in the north end, where we may have multiple houses in one large area, and all of their mailboxes are right there, at the edge of the road, which happens a lot in rural areas. It helps to have, the house numbers a little closer to the actual house itself, so they can, figure out where the emergency is coming from quicker.
Good.
Yeah, it's a great program, and Fire Rescue does a really great job at keeping up with all of that. So I'm moving on to some questions here. Okay. Whitney Durst is asking if people can be fined for moving empty vendor chairs or scooting them back from where they are.
I'm not in that business. So I'm not fining folks for that. Because I don't know what their contracts are. I don't know where, again, if it's on private. So, for instance, if you're at Rosemary and they've rented out the vendor space, I just don't want to speak to that. It's just not something we do.
Yeah. Karina Nicole Contreras. I'm not sure if this has been asked, but why not put pressure on the county to put curfews in place during spring break like Bay County?
Sure, but so that's kind of a misnomer. Bay County, not all of Bay County has that. When you pass a curfew, it has to be for the entire entity, right? So if you pass a curfew, it has to be for all of Walton County. So all of a sudden, I've got Paxton in a curfew. Or Defuniak Springs in a curfew because if something happens at
I think that the way Bay County in general gets around is Panama City Beach. is a municipality.
Correct. It's a smaller
they're
area.
Incorporated.
It's a smaller area. And some private properties can put, for instance, Seaside or Rosemary or Alice or anybody else in the public's on private property. They can say, hey, we want to put up a curfew. So you'll see that, and some of those places are doing that. But you can't put up a countywide, or you should not put up a countywide curfew. Now, if those entities want to enact that, those communities, they absolutely can do that.
Okay. Stephen Chansey, do your deputies or EMS use life vac device while on patrol. LifeVac is used for people and kids that are choking. I've actually seen the commercials, and they're quite impressive.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I don't think so. I'm not familiar with that.
Maybe something we could look into.
Yeah, maybe some way T&E.
Getting. Somebody on X is asking about the Coast Guard being up.
Yes.
And then from YouTube, Abby Trimble, is there any conversation around putting a bike path? Okay, I think that was a question about East Point, Washington. We've asked and answered that. Whitney Durst, do you write tickets for pedestrians not using crosswalks? And how much is that fine?
Don't know the fine off the top of your head. Yes, you can be cited for not using a crosswalk.
Okay. Somebody on YouTube asked if there was any discussion on the private security officers that are standing or imposing on the public beaches. We discussed that a little bit earlier.
They can't threaten or intimidate or something that in the public sphere. Short version.
Todd Martin said, you keep saying our county commissioners will help, but we have been talking to them for years about the private versus public.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, I think I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but I'm not in a position to do that. And the legislature and your board of county commissioners, those are your two legislative entities. They are the only two entities, to my knowledge, that have any control over that. So the board can pass a resolution or decide that they want to pursue certain courses of action. That's their decision to make. And I wasn't in office when, it was way before my time, when they renourished west of Topsail. I don't know what started that. I know they had looked at that a number of years ago for east of Topsail, and you know, there was some objections to doing that. So I don't know where that's at. I don't know if that's I mean, I know the legislature can do it, and I know the board can engage in that, but that's decisions they have to make. I'm not advocating for that course of action. I'm just telling you those are way outside of my purview.
Bobby Rogers is asking, can we still fish from the water's edge?
Yes.
And Jennifer Evans is asking if you can fish anywhere on the water line. Can you put a chair down if you're fishing?
No, you shouldn't be stopped in the water. You should not be stopped in the wave line. I think I'm saying that right. But I want to refer to people because I'm doing all this from memory off the top of my head, including handling low-speed vehicles and other things. There's always a chance I say something wrong, right?
You can traverse.
You can traverse. That's exactly
the water
correct.
line.
So you can also go ahead and look at our policy. It's up with pictures and explanations on this thing. And so that way I don't want to misrepresent anything, or you change one detail, you can change the facts, right? So go ahead and look at that online. Watch our town hall meeting. I go over it in detail for over an hour and a half. And then the pictures that are in that policy, it's under public records on our website. Really need to, people should just print it out and keep it. If you have any questions, you can pass it out and look at it.
From YouTube, in order to make sure that LSV drivers have no excuse for driving on Highway 98, can the county require some sort of driver-facing sticker on the windshield?
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, it's already on the windshield. Yeah, we actually did that a couple of years ago.
In many cases.
First of all, do you really need a sticker not to tell you to be on Highway 98?
And apparently they need something.
I can't fathom that you even need a sticker.
I think
for
that something is common sense. But
yeah, we're actually putting a new sticker with a QR code to go on there. You know, so they just anything we can, we're trying.
Yeah,
but if you look, most of these low-speed vehicles have a sticker in the front windshield that's
right in front of the driver
with a big star on it for the Walton County Sheriff's Office saying, "Don't do this."
Yeah. Shelley White, do you have any more interest for putting more patrol on Highway 20 in that corridor? A lot of head-on traffic coming at a high rate.
We've had a traffic unit down there working pretty steadily down there. So the Freeport District has a traffic unit now designed simply to work traffic, you know, and so that's what we're trying to do that. I think after this next year, once we get these positions filled, we're going to reevaluate where folks need to be. Freeport is just absolutely exploding. And so, you know, we're trying to figure out how to man that area appropriately as well, too.
Okay. Todd OLM, Sheriff, with all due respect, given the beaches are private, why can't the sheriff's office vehicles drive on these private beaches absent permission from each individual property owner? Absent an emergency, of course. Just random patrols driving across private properties without permission doesn't seem to be allowable. Thanks for all you do, and you have my support.
No, it's actually not allowable. It's not allowable. We don't actually just drive up and down, up no more than we would somebody's field. Now, if there's a reason for us to go and do something, we're going to do that, right? And we have that transverse period or transverse area through, close to the water line. But yeah, we're not in a large areas of these beach with vehicles because of that very reason. I was getting letters from attorneys immediately saying, "Hey, we're going to sue you if you cross here." So understand that we're trying to balance all this, and I don't want to give a misperception this is every owner, because that's not the case. Many officers are extremely reasonable about this, and I'm sympathetic to those owners that are being. Some folks are trying to instigate conflict, right, across the board too. So, no, we're not just patrolling up and down like that because of that. For that very reason, it's problematic. Now, if we need to drive across there for a specific reason, we're going to do it. Not going to, just like we would anywhere else. We'll go on private property if we have to for a life safety issue or something compelling public interest. But there has to be a compelling public interest.
Yeah. Laura Spooner, can I ask why taxpayers are paying for 2 police cars sitting by the beach protecting the private beach for the owners who sued? Taxpayers are paying for those salaries and they are the ones who sued. Why are they not paying for the security? I have no idea what she's talking about.
I literally don't. But I can tell you one thing. If they're there, one of 2 things is happening. A, they are not just, the whole beach is not private. So we got to be clear about that. There's many parts of the beach is open to the public and in public beaches, including the sovereign water line all the whole way, right? And so deputies have to be closer by the access during this period of time. That's option 1. And again, that's one of those statements, everybody is so mad about this thing. Keep in mind, there is a lot of public beach that we have to be able to get to. Secondly, private property owners are taxpayers as well, too. So you can't say they're not taxpayers. But they're not entitled to more service because of the cost of their house, right? So we're not that either. We have to go where the calls for service are. So it's kind of the short version. But I'm not sure what she's actually talking about.
Brian Campbell, did the sheriff have a chance to take a look at the Board of County Commission meetings where the deputy stopped citizens from speaking? If so, what was the outcome?
So I watched part of one of them, and so kind of my short version of this, and the guidance I've said to the board and that we've given to our staff, we treat the Board of County Commission exactly like we do the courtroom. In other words, they are, if they're asking us to remove somebody or they're asking somebody to stop speaking, they set the ground rules for that. However, and here's a big however, there's a First Amendment right to speak, and you cannot stop somebody from speaking because you don't like what they're saying, right? So the board has the decision to make what their rules are. Once they set those rules, they can say whatever, no public comments. That's fine. They can do that, and we will have to enforce that. That's the way the kind of court has come down on it. But what we're not going to get into is stifling speech absent without direct direction. In other words, an order from the sitting chair. Now, do I agree with everything? Probably not. But if I'm not standing there, you do not want a deputy sheriff trying to make the decision, well, I don't like this speech, or I'll decide not to hear this speech. That's not the way the court has ruled on this. The court has ruled that when they are in that public setting, the board, the chairman and the Board of County, they're accepting the liability for that. In other words, they're saying that this violated our rules. We'll go on what they say. But they take certain risk with that too. So I don't know if that's the kind of a long way of saying that, but we're very reticent when it comes to limiting or impinging on speech or assembly. Very similar to during elections, why we don't have deputies down at election places with so many, because there's an intimidation factor. So I don't know if that answered it well enough for him, but
Okay.
kind of the short version.
Wes Herndon, I don't have a dog in the fight on the beach stuff, but is the sheriff's office concerned about the aggressive rhetoric that seems to be increasing as of late?
Very much so. Mr. Herndon, extremely concerned about it. You can hear just from the tone of these questions, the impassioned, that people have opinions, very strong, and on both sides of the issue. And our job is not to become inflamed in that, to mediate and mitigate disputes where we can. But it's hard when people believe so passionately in their right, the right to private property, the right to the beach. But we, the sheriff's office, have to abide by the law. but have to make sure that we treat our citizens and our visitors with respect. It's a tough situation. It is not being helped by any of this. I mean, there has got to be some direction, but nobody else is down. Legislators aren't down here. County commissioners aren't down here. The people that are standing on the beach are the citizens, the sheriff's office, and the private property owners, right? The tourists and the private property. And we're that point of contact. And I understand that. I've told Corey, we had this discussion many weeks from now. I said, man, everybody's going to be mad at us. I said, they were going to be mad before we did anything because this is the business we're in. But I am, to your point specifically, Mr. Turner, I'm extremely concerned about the Reddick. I don't want to say misinformation, but for the lack of it, people are putting stuff that is not accurate or they're misrepresenting the facts of what's happening. We watched a video confrontation between a citizen and a private property owner, where clearly the citizen, the tourist, had instigated to get a video. They didn't give the whole video out, and then say, oh, look, well, everybody agrees because they want the beaches all to be open in public. But that doesn't mean the private property owner was in the wrong. And in fact, it was instigated by the tourist. These are the kind of things where everybody's going for likes on the camera or likes on the social media, and everybody's saying rah, rah, rah. It doesn't make you any more legally right. You can be as loud as you want to be. Doesn't make you right. Just makes you loud. And if you want to change something, you've got to change it at the legislative. You've got to change it in the court, or you've got to change it legislatively. Otherwise, we're just talking. So.
Yeah. Curtis Johansson, can the stop signs near the public beach accesses be labeled "Do not park within 25 feet"? Is it a law to do that? I guess I'm not understanding. Maybe people are blocking the stop signs near public beach accesses. I'm not sure.
I'm going to have to tell you off the top of my head, I don't know the answer. I'm not familiar that it was. I'm not saying it's not. I just have to look at it.
Yeah.
But if there's a parking, go ahead and call code.
Okay.
And let them come out there and let them take
Code,
a look at it.
Yeah, code
enforcement,
compliance.
yes.
Yeah.
Code compliance.
Whitney Durst, on red flag days, are people being fined for entering the water?
On double red flag days or when they're violation of red flags, yeah, we cite folks when necessary.
Drew on X wants to know, what time was Chris Smelly reported missing? How long has he been missing now?
He was reported to the sheriff's office approximately give or take 1 p.m.
Yeah, and he went into the water at around 8:30 this morning. Yeah. So, okay, so, all right. A lot of these we've answered, and it's really hard to. I'm kind of sifting through conversations and stuff like that.
That's it. People having really heated conversations about this, right?
Yeah. Elizabeth Parker, thanks for all you do and your deputies are doing for all of us. Spring break is almost over.
Almost. Then it's Memorial Day, and then it's 4th of July, and business we're in. Believe it or not, we do a lot of other stuff than just stay down on the beach. I know that's we kind of laugh about that, but we've got a lot of stuff going on.
The county is 1,200 square miles.
Yeah.
So, Lisa Ann Del Maro, is there a dispute about the line in the sand? And if there is a dispute about the line in the sand, and nobody is really sure where the property line is,
tie goes to the runner.
Because the Gulf is constantly shifting body of water. Who is right? Who has to move? Just seems like a huge waste of resources.
Do you think?
Yeah.
One would think it might be. Yeah. Yes. No, the short version is we live in the world of GPS surveys. So it's not like it was, 20 years ago. If they have the survey, we're able to tell that. I mean, it's not like it was 20 years ago. We can know where the property lines are out within reason, right? And in the wave line, that's the reason when the wave line is used. If the wave is breaking on your feet or if the water is hitting your feet, you're in the wave line, right? And so then we're not going to deal with that. That's kind of the easiest way I can kind of tell you. But if we can't to go back to her central point, if we can't determine clearly and definitively, then, we're going to leave it as is.
Yeah. A question from X, from Mila. How do the police report a missing body dead when not able to find them in the ocean? How do you?
Well, we're not. Listen, we're way premature for that. We're our idea that we're going to find this gentleman and we're going to stay with that. So I'm not going to contemplate that right now.
Todd Hoff on Facebook. Love your live sessions as Walton County Sheriff's Office. Is there a law that keeps an individual county commissioner from doing a similar live session with their constituents?
No, they can do this.
Okay.
You mean, you might find this hard to believe, not everybody wants to sign up for this. It was funny. So
I'm kind of questioning myself,
laughed about
too.
this. Well, you got to be transparent. I was like, I don't know if I can get any more transparent than this. This is as good as I can get for you.
Yeah. Elizabeth O'Brien, how is the housing situation for deputies, fire rescue, et cetera? Is there enough affordable housing for them now and in the future?
No, I mean, absolutely not. It is probably one of the biggest. Listen, if you're a teacher, if you are you work for the power company, you are a deputy sheriff, you're a nurse, you're whatever, the housing situation is critical. It is absolutely critical. It is affecting our ability to bring people and recruit into this county. I think I looked the other day, in one unit of our organization that had 165 members in it, only 50 lived in this county, only 50. Mm-hmm. And another one, less than 40% lived in this county because they cannot afford to live here. Yeah. The rent, first of all, if there's some place to rent, the rents are astronomical, and the price of these homes are completely pricing people out of the market. That's not news to, it's not maybe not unique to Walton County, but it's uniquely high in Walton County. It's uniquely high in Walton County. I've talked to several developers and several folks that are trying to do something, that are trying to build homes that are affordable and make sense. Mm-hmm. But this is crashing around us for a lot of folks.
Okay.
Good question.
Brandon on X, formerly known as Twitter. The bill just signed about squatters' rights being gone. How often do you have to deal with that in Walton County? Is there anything you'd like to discuss about it?
No, so it's not so much about, for us, we've kind of always dealt with that as trespassing, an immediate trespass. So it's not really as much of a problem because, as I just said, there's any vacant property in Walton County, the best I can tell. People are in it all the time. Not being funny, but that really is an issue. We have the opposite problem, this housing shortage, right? Mm-hmm. So we have always kind of dealt with those immediately as trespassers. So we don't call it squatting the same way that some of the bigger communities in South Florida do. We get people out immediately when it comes to that, unless there's some kind of civil contract. And there's a civil contract that's a little bit different animal. But
Carmen Van wants to know if the girl who was the victim in our shooting, if she's okay.
Yes, she's a very lucky young lady.
Yeah.
Extremely lucky young lady.
Yeah. We've addressed this one, but is it legal for beachfront owners to build a sand wall to obstruct the beach?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, and then sorry, I'm looking for questions. On YouTube, his username is Redneck Philosopher. I have an idea for the podcast using unmarked cars. Some people have strong feelings about it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
And we can talk about that. Sean Allen is asking about the rubber bands used on the beach umbrellas. I think we've gotten this question before. Where the rubber bands, they're thick and they end up coming off the beach umbrellas and they get in the sand and it's a hazard. He's asking why the TDC doesn't rake the vehicles like they did in the past, why they don't use a rake. And that might have to do with what we're dealing with now.
Yeah. Not using taxpayer dollars on private property.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And okay. Sean Allen Meredith, why aren't there flashing pedestrian crossing lights yellow? I would assume since you're required to stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk,
it's not a legal requirement. Believe it or not, it's not a legal requirement. I think it should be, and there's some in Rosemary. I think Rosemary is the only place on 30A that has them. I don't think it's the only place in the county that may have them. I actually think they're a great idea, but some people don't like the aesthetic of it. But it's just so dangerous, pedestrians shooting across the roadway.
Yeah.
But it is not a legal requirement, just to be clear.
Okay. Mike Lesage, there are never green flags on the beach. If it's really calm, why isn't the green flag system used? The only way that we can find out if it's really green is to check Henderson State Park's website.
You know what? I can ask that question to South Walton. Generally takes care of the flags. The only time I become in flags, and just that it's super, it gets really dangerous. But that's a good question. I'll be happy to pass that on to Chief Crawford's folks and see what we can do to kind of get that information out.
Okay. Whitney wants to know how can anyone put a chair, umbrella for shade, beach towel, or anything on the wet sand wave line? Can they put down a chair, umbrella?
You don't want to stop people from being able to transverse. Does that make sense? You can't block that through there. So you can't set up camp in the front of that, basically is what it shorts down. But I'm telling you, when you look, one of the major problems here is people don't know where the public beach is at. There is a lot of public beach. We just have to be able to get to it. You have to be able to get to it. You have to know where it's at. And I know, I don't want to say put up signs because people will skewer me for that, but really, there probably should be signs that say, this is public beach. Here's where public beach is at, and I just don't know what they're going to do with that.
Okay.
We're trying to navigate this without having exact maps right now, and it's just very difficult.
Yeah. What is the grace period for expired vehicle tags? There is a lot of expired tags in Walton County still driving around. That question's from Sandra on YouTube.
Well, there's not really technically any grace period, right? As a general rule, we give you to the end of the month of which your birthday's in.
Okay.
That's just kind of more of a policy than it is the law. The law is if it expires the 24th, you know that it expires every year. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Are private beaches only in Walton County or the entire state of Florida?
A lot of the county has, a lot of the state is kind of a mixture, right? So Bay County, you don't hear Bay County having this problem because their beaches were renourished. Okaloosa County Walton County and Okaloosa have a lot of renourished beaches. There are places that have this private beach issue, right? So so it's kind of a mixed bag is kind of the short version. But this is the epicenter for this discussion right now.
Okay. All right. Okay. Dale Harden, why can't there be an exact property line on the beachfront property instead of moving to the tide? Regular property has an exact line that would make it easier for us public to walk down the beach and not be harassed.
How true that is. Unfortunately, because the shoreline ebbs and flows, so in other words, it can be longer when it comes in. The way it currently works is if more sand comes up, the property owner gets more sand. If it goes back, in other words, if it's eroded, their property line can be out in the water. Mm-hmm. But they still can't, you're still, as the public, able to transverse the water line. Mm-hmm. The problem for us, just to be clear, the problem for the sheriff's office typically is not the water line. That's not where our problem. Our problem really comes in east and west boundaries where it's harder to mark, if that makes sense to you. But if it's just in a water line, it's not really that hard for us. We go, it's in the wave line. It's the wave line. Wherever the water is breaking is where it's at that day.
To follow up with that, Todd Martin says, Sheriff, you're wrong.
Shocking.
It isn't the wave line. It's the mean high tide water line in Florida. Please explain why I'm wrong. Mean high tide water line. This line represents the average height of...
Over 20 years rolling conservative Nash. I'm extremely familiar with the mean high tide water line.
It's crucial for distinguishing public land from private property. Land seaward of the mean high tide water line is generally considered public and subject to regulations.
Right. But what happens is that many times the mean high tide water line is in the water for many, many hours of the day. So, for instance, it's not uncommon, and I'll take you guys back probably 4 or 5 years ago. There was a gentleman who put buoys up in the water because the mean high tide water line was out into the water. And essentially, you would think, because what you said is factually correct about it, once it becomes what they call submerged, it's sovereign to the state of Florida. However, the exception to that is at some point when it pulls back, at any point, that is still their property. So what the state is, that term mean high tide water line, I don't want to get too far into confusing people. It came out of a settlement out of Destin many years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago, where we kind of used that as terminology. Mm-hmm. The short version it is, the only way to make it fair to the public was to use the wave line, because the mean high tide water line many, many times is out into water itself. I know that sounds crazy, but when you look at it, that'll. And if Mr. Rourke, if you want to, I'm sorry, what did you say? Was Rourke Wells?
It's Todd. It's Todd Martin.
Yeah, or I'm sorry, Mr. Martin. If you want to, we can send you the copy of the legal stand-up so you can look at it. But our policy probably does the best job of explaining it. It's just crazy because so many times the mean high tide water line over the rolling average of 20 years is actually in the water for many, many hours of the day. So if you use that as the logic of it, then you wouldn't be able to walk down during the shoreline. And there were people that said they wanted people to walk out into the water waist deep to walk past.
Hey, I want to cut in here. The Coast Guard has found Chris.
Oh, outstanding. So.
Hey, so for all of you on here asking, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook right now. So the Coast Guard has found Chris. He flagged the Coast Guard down. They were trying to get somebody down to him from the helicopter. The helicopter located him out in the Gulf. So 100% confirmed with the Coast Guard that Chris has been found. So he's okay. This is really great news. This is really, really great news. So I hope everybody watching is
about 10 to 15 miles offshore.
Yeah. This is the best news that we probably could have got.
Yeah, it's outstanding.
So I'm gonna update everybody with that. So that's really great news. Chris has been located. Do we want to keep taking questions? It's 7:30. I think we're.
Well, I didn't resolve the beach issue. You sure I can go home? Yeah, it's so complex, and again, everybody comes at it from a point of view. But I understand I get that. I try not to be too sarcastic about it, but it's just at a time there's no gotcha in this deal. It's complex. It's not simple, and anybody that says all you have to do is X doesn't really have a full grasp of what the issue really is, and being passionate about it doesn't necessarily make us legally right. Mm-hmm. So what I would suggest, I'm going to go back to this again. I would suggest that, if wherever your position comes down to this, that you reach out to your legislator or your board of county commissioners and express a solution. But the solution can't just be, I don't like it. Mm-hmm. Give them a solution. Give them something to work with, whatever you think it is, and we'll go from there. Corey, any final comments, anything from that standpoint?
No, I think I'm getting inundated with text messages from folks who wanted an update about Chris, and they have the United States Coast Guard out of Mobile has located Chris, so he has been located safe. He's okay. It looks like he was about 10 to 15 miles offshore, so he had a rough day. He had a rough day, but it looks like he's okay. So
God's blessings upon him. Amen.
Yeah, that's he's lucky. So with that, we're gonna take off so that we can get this message out, and we appreciate you all, and have a great night.
Okay, thank you guys.